we'll lead off. Look, that's what everybody's asking about is conference expansion. And here's what Brett Yormark had to say about that and their plans at the Big 12.
What Lauren said, we have some guiding principles, when we think about expansion. I mean, it's all strategic here. And at the top is the academic alignment and the leadership and the cultural fit and the geography and the athletic performance and the upside that a potential institution has as they would potentially, join the Big 12. And we think about all those things as a collective group, and we discussed all those guiding principles this week. So hopefully that helps kind of framing for you and crystallizes for you how we're thinking about it.
So there's their plan. I mean, those are the center talking points, but the fit, I think that's the one that sticks out to me the most because the Big 12, in my opinion, is the league that has the most schools that are like each other. The ACC has got kind of a smattering. The Pac-12 has a smattering. Maybe the SEC.
I'd say the SEC's got a lot of like-minded folks, it appears.
Yeah, it is just, but like if you look now at especially now that you've got like big, gigantic, huge brand names and all that. So
that's part of it, yeah.
Yeah, all of that. But the SEC and the Big 12 don't have that many outliers to their group. Everybody's kind of about the same. Like their academic mission, like all those things are the same. The Pac-12, and I think that's one of the things that they're wrestling right now, is that, you've got a bunch of different schools that can look out into the future and see different paths for themselves that are not necessarily aligned with each other. As of right now with the Big 12, like even if they weren't in the same conference, they could probably find their way to each other because the schools are all very similar, when it comes to size and, obviously the geography of it. So, yeah, that's an interesting part to me on expansion. But those are the basic talking points of it.
Well, I mean, he laid out like 10 talking. I mean, he if he would have stopped at academics initially, that was going to really raise my eyebrows because there's been so much talk about that, and I was like, oh my god, this is going to feed some beast if you just had stopped at academics because, first of all, that just that with the whole realignment saga has been such a big talking point, even if it's not even been Big 12 related, even if you're talking like the Big 10 and them looking at candidates, it's always, circles back to some academic point. So the fact that he mentioned that, I was like, oh boy, here we go. And then he rattled off like 9 other things that are all everything else that matters. So like alignment and geography and athletics and upside. So basically he narrowed it down to anybody is available that fits like half of those. But all the teams that have been mentioned fit all those, or fit, some of those boxes. So, I don't think that gives us any sort of a, extra insight into what exactly they could be looking at. I think we have a pretty good idea already. But, yeah, those are a lot of the boxes that you check. And, I'm not sure, how many of them will check all of those or if any of them will check all of those. But there's certainly some of those candidates that geographically it makes sense. Athletics-wise, it makes sense. Upside-wise, it makes sense. The alignment piece is interesting because what are some of the ideas of some of the candidates that they're looking at? But yeah, that's a lot of the things that they have to look into, and shows you that it's not just as simple as, well, let's just they look cool, let's go grab them. You have to actually do a little bit more research, and that's what they are doing right now, or have been doing, I should say. It appears.
Yep, and yeah, so there's your broad strokes look at it. Now, Big 12 Mexico, they're unveiling the plan next week, but here's what Brett Yormark had to say about the plans to have events in Mexico.
When we announced it formally, and I know there was some information that was prematurely put out there, it will outline for you our strategic plan, why we're doing it, the rationale behind it, how we're going to enter the market, who we're partnering with, and it could potentially include, what teams we'll launch with. So more to come on that, but we're truly excited about our international plans and getting into that market sooner than later.
Yeah, and this is, obviously you could theoretically play a football game down there, and the NFL does, and American football is popular, but this is about basketball. And that's what his fastball is basketball. So I thought it was I didn't realize that information was prematurely out there. I just thought it was.
I think he's referring to the announcement or the
team.
report that was like Kansas and Houston are playing in Mexico City. That's how I took that because that was put out there earlier this month or last month that was. Yeah, like Joseph Duarte was talking about it, and whoever else that had that out there, that it was going to be KU and Houston in Mexico. So for basketball, right? Basketball was what it was going to be. So I'm sure that's what he's referring to. And it would be funny if in the end it's KU and Houston playing basketball down there. I mean, that certainly makes some sense. I do want to learn more about like the part of it for Kelvin Sampson or for Bill Self of like what do you get out of going and playing this game in Mexico as opposed to playing it in Lawrence or playing it in Houston? Is there a little extra bump for going and losing one of those home games? Is there some recruiting advantage that you get from it? Is it just part of being a good teammate? Which, hey, if that's all it is, and that's great, that's even better because you're just doing it for the benefit of everybody, in your conference. But I'm interested to learn more and just kind of see what the broader big picture is for the launch of this and how many games are we talking and when are we talking about a football game and where are they playing it and all of the little details I think will be interesting. This is obviously not a short-term play. This is a long-term play. Who knows if Brett Yormark will even be around to see the fruits of the seeds being planted right now, because I think if you're trying to lay inroads into Mexico, that's going to take a while. That's not just like, boom, you're there and you play a game and all of a sudden like some 5-star from Mexico City's like wanting to come play, for Iowa State or something. But you got to start somewhere, and I'm interested to learn a lot more about this. I have my doubts. I'm not going to just be fully on board with everything they announce and be like, it's a great idea because Yormark said it. But I do think there is, possibly some interesting things that could come of this. So, give me some more details here pretty soon, like he says they will, and we'll sort through those and, have a better opinion on what exactly we're talking about. But I like that they're being imaginative and they're not just just the same old. I'm intrigued.
Yeah, absolutely. Number 3 here on the list of gambling is a slippery slope that is becoming legal in more and more states. Actually, the House just passed sports betting in Texas here, which I didn't think would happen.
Are we doing that now? Like I don't keep track of it. Are we getting? Where are we on the betting for Texas thing?
The Senate's not going to pass it.
Okay.
Because Dan Patrick's not.
We don't get to do anything down here.
Yeah.
We really nothing gets passed that would be like anything along those lines, or the marijuana laws, or like any number of other things that I guess other places have passed. Like we are always going to be one of the last ones that feels like to do any of that if we ever do.
Yeah. So our House was like, let's party, and our Senate was like, guys, 9 p.m. You're in bed. Let's not do that. Like you shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah, so, I just hadn't checked in on. I mean, it's not life-changing for me. I mean, obviously it would be big. It'd probably be a lot easier to get sponsors for that type of thing.
That's the only thing I care about.
Right. Like, I mean, that part of it would make a lot of sense and would be great. But, as personally, it doesn't like change my life in any great way. But because of that, I haven't really kept track of it. And I probably should just in general. But I didn't know where we were with that.
It's the only reason I really do. That right, and the fact of like, following along for the, just knowing if a kid here at Baylor got in trouble for it, then, it'd be legal in the state. So it's one of those things that makes it harder. But, yeah, the only reason I follow along at all is because eventually – and we've had gambling sponsors before, but it
would just be easier to say,
so
like, you could go somewhere
easier
in Texas and just do it and not – or on an app and not have to, like, circumvent and, all these various things.
Yeah, we had a sponsor for a while, and they paid their bill on time, but they're like, hey, we got to pay it in Bitcoin. I was like, Thanks, guys. Great.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that. Let me tell you about this opportunity that I'm just kidding.
Yeah. So, wonderful. But anyway, here's Brett Yormark on gambling and the issues that are facing college athletics, in particular the Big 12.
Obviously, it's an issue for all of us within the industry and something that, we're going to have to manage as effectively as possible. We had U.S. Integrity make a presentation to us this week. We take that very seriously. We're going to double down in our efforts with U.S. Integrity. We're going to obviously advocate for student athlete education in the area of sports betting and working with U.S. Integrity to do that and more. So it's certainly an issue. It's in the news. The NCAA obviously has provided us with data. It's becoming more widespread as far as sports betting in that demo 18 to 22, and something that the conference takes very seriously. And we did address it during our meetings here, and Charlie Baker spoke to it as well.
Yeah, one of the things I think is just going to be interesting about gambling, I think we talked about this when they had the LSU issue, baseball issue a couple of years, Alabama LSU baseball game, Alabama baseball issue a couple of weeks ago.
I'm glad you clarified. I got some
sorry.
LSU fan like, we weren't doing anything.
No. Yeah. But the Alabama issue a couple of weeks ago, in that the schools and the conferences would love to take casino money. Because casinos, and like I said before about advertising, that's why I care about it, they have very large advertising budgets.
Yeah.
And they know they're
Look
getting...
at Pat McAfee with his FanDuel deal.
They know they're getting it back. Like everything. If I think about the movie Ocean's 13, like they had to rob the casino, like everybody had to win and they had to get them out of the casino because the casino wasn't going to worry about losing because...
insurance.
5 minutes later, 5 minutes later, the people are going to dump it all back in, so that's why they had to do it. So they know they're getting the money back. They know it. They're not worried about losing it. For the most part, if you fail in the casino business, I don't know why. It's essentially illegal money laundering, like all of these things that happen. But the conferences want that money. The pro leagues are taking that money right now in droves. The NFL, Major League Baseball, the NBA, the NHL, Major League Soccer, they're all going to take it. In Europe, they're all over the place. So they're taking casino money. They want it. But now, because they can't allow their people to do it, they're in a position where they're like, wow, we can't take this money. So really, what I think ultimately this is all the things that they're going to do is try to set up a framework in place so that they can eventually take money from Caesars Sportsbook and be like, well, no, we've done everything to separate ourselves from it. But it is a problem because you're going to have athletes that have easy access to it. And before, you had to know a guy. Now you don't need to know a guy. You need to have a phone.
Yeah, I mean, I think I slightly look at it differently initially. Like, I agree that they want that money and all of that and will ultimately probably get it. But I think first they're just covering their tracks and their bases, kind of like you said. I think that's first and foremost because right now it is still against the rules, and you have to be mindful of that. And we saw how much of a dust up there was with the Alabama deal, and how that could slide sideways to where all of a sudden you're losing a coach, just boom like that. So, yeah, I mean, it's a pressing issue. It's obviously being talked about quite a bit now. It's just one of the latest things that is on the list of things that you're having to manage and wrestle with as athletic directors and presidents and commissioners nowadays. And I'd imagine that, depending on where we go, the SEC, Big Ten, and whoever else is, around and a part of just the bigger picture, that if we look down years down the road, that there's so much money flowing, it's inevitably going to come from gambling in some form or fashion. I just don't see how that's not a part of it. There's just way too much money. And let's not kid ourselves. Yes, a lot of these people are in the education business, but the whole college athletics enterprise is based around making money and money flowing. And so, yeah, it's inevitable. But the fact that, not every state's on board does make it a more complex issue. And it's going to be, I guess interesting to see how they kind of put this puzzle together and how they manage this moving forward. But I guess the bigger thing to me is I feel like it's inevitable, and I just don't know how long it's going to take though. But as somebody who's not really involved with that, I'm just surprised, and maybe I shouldn't be, but I don't have kids that are kids in general, but just that age either. So I know a lot of people my age probably have seen their kids grow up, and it's not a surprise they're involved in gambling. But I'm just like, man, 18 and 22-year-olds are that interested in sports gambling? That was just more of a surprise to me, because I guess just it being so much more available and cell phones being what they are and compared to when I was that age, it just was never even a thought in my head. I know a couple people who have from way back, they had their bookie and whatever, but it was so hush-hush and secret, and my best friend wouldn't tell me who his bookie was, that kind of thing. And I guess just the availability makes it so easy. But yeah, it's just surprising to me that there's so many apparently that are that age that are let's bet on sports. And I don't know if that's an encouraging thing or a super discouraging thing where, like, that's how they're remaining entertained by it? Because I know that's the case for a lot of people. We've had people who listen, like, I listen to the show because of the gambling part of it. Like, I want to learn to then go place bets. And so it's just a different world from my perspective, and just interesting to hear that because I don't have a lot of experience with, that area. So it's good to know.
My dad was a casino guy. Like, he would go and play poker and blackjack and loved craps. And I remember the first time we went to Vegas, well, the only time I went with him, but I was 21, so I was just able to experience Vegas. And I remember being so nervous every step I took, every step of the way, the whole time. And I could not – I'm nervous now. Like, I've placed 2 sports bets in my life, and it's both been when I'm standing outside of a sports book in a place where it's legal on a game that's happening that day, just to see if I can make some money and bet $10. Like, that's all I was doing. And even that was like, I'm going to lose $10. There's no way the Bulls are going to win this game. Those kind of things. Like, yeah. I can't do it. I'm fascinated by it's kind of like how I am with European soccer. I'm really fascinated by all of it. I just can't keep track in that way. I'm interested when it's at the end, or I love all the different tiers and ways that they do things. But if you're going to ask me, how the guy from Real Madrid's doing, I'm not going to be able to tell you. Same with gambling. Like, I'm fascinated by it, but it still makes me nervous. And so,
yeah, I mean, it's just not something that was on my mind, but it's just a different world. So it's just interesting to me that that's something that they have to be mindful of. I just don't remember it ever really being that much of a problem before, where you had like the entire landscape talking about this giant existential threat to the athletics landscape. So from that point of view, it's just, a situation that I don't think the sports gambling's been an issue at times, but like this widespread amongst college athletics of like, there's this problem that a lot of 18 to 22-year-olds and now coaches as well are apparently betting on these games. That's surprising because I didn't realize there was that much interest in it. And I think most of all, I just thought that people were wise enough to know that was a no-no. And that's not something you're allowed to do, but apparently that's also part of the education right now is that, no, you're not allowed to do that if you're these college athletes and coaches, and so don't do that. But clearly they're having to reinforce that message quite a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Garrett, let's skip the innovation one and just go right to separating football and basketball, because this has been something talked about in the media deals, because the Big 12 feels basketball is a little undervalued, and especially with the basketball league that they have, separating those media deals will be able to net the conference more money and maybe let them close the gap on the other leagues that have not done this.
As we think about the future and ways to create value, there is always that option to decouple basketball from football to see if there's further value we can create for the conference. And we have positioned ourselves to do so at that point in time, if the opportunity presents itself and it makes sense.
There you go. I think I think the opportunity will present itself, and that's why you hear a lot of the basketball expansion talk to increase the value of what basketball is. And it's already they could not, with the 12 teams they're going to have in the future, and the top 3 or 4 teams in the league every year are going to be primetime games all the time.
Yeah, I mean, we've heard this a lot and talked about it quite a bit, their ideas of how they can make basketball more profitable. I'm just, the one thing to me that I still haven't figured out is, if you do this, don't everybody else just go and do this as well? I guess you're banking on you make more money doing it than maybe others do, because as far as like the closing the gap part, right? Because like, wouldn't the SEC then go and separate their basketball deal, and wouldn't the ACC do that, and wouldn't everybody basically do that? So like, how much are you actually catching up? That's the part that I don't quite understand yet. But the rest of it, like decoupling and trying to make more money, like that makes all the sense in the world. I just don't know how much you eliminate that
it may be the short-term thing.
Yeah. Because but as arguably the best basketball conference, if you have a couple teams win a couple more titles between now and, was it 2031, when that deal will be up, I think is what he said. Then if you add Gonzaga and UConn, and you're like, hey, here's 4 of the last 5 national title winners, and here's 12 Final Four teams in the last 8 years, and maybe not everybody else can say that, and you are the clear basketball number 1, and so you help close that gap while everybody else is also doing the same thing by the fact that you are the best and therefore you get more out of it and you get more juice squeezed out of it. And that makes sense that you would get perhaps the most pie, and that's how you separate yourself a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I think again they're looking at every nook and cranny to find dollars, right? And what makes sense. And that is certainly a strength that this conference has at the moment. And you would think that only continues despite the loss of a good program in Texas and a good program in Oklahoma. Each have had their high moments and their, not so great moments, but they both had major contributions over the years. And, you hope that the 4 schools coming in will be able to, carry that same weight, if not carry even more of it. But, you talk about the others that could join the fray as well that are particularly a basketball interest, like Gonzaga and UConn. And that certainly raises the stakes potentially for you. At least you hope it does. If it doesn't, then something went wrong in the plan along the way. If all of a sudden Houston's not great at basketball, that'd be a bummer, or, whoever could join as well. But yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense, and that's something that they keep hammering home. So be curious to see what that ends up looking like here in a few years.
Yep, absolutely. All right, when we come back, Scott Doctor